In that last segment, I presented my view that both ranked choice voting and star voting would eliminate the familiar spoiler scenario in which a marginal candidate is accused of being the spoiler, and that by doing so, they would each give a boost to third-party and independent candidates in the sense that they would get more voter attention, be able to show better results in the final outcome, and maybe even win more offices than they do now. In fact, I'm pretty sure they would win more offices than they do now, but I don't think either of them would overthrow the two-party system without further changes to our election processes. I also said that star voting outperforms ranked choice voting in a couple of ways. The first is the so-called spoiler scenario, in which under ranked choice voting, by actually ranking your first choice first, it might work against you. Well, that won't happen under star voting. We don't know how often it happens under ranked choice voting, but it does happen, and it's not a good thing. So star voting is better in that sense, and also I think star voting would do a little better at helping third-party and independent candidates, just from the sense that the lower scores that candidates get also help them, whereas in ranked choice voting, when those candidates get lower rankings, those rankings aren't necessarily going to count toward the final outcome. So in this segment, what I want to do is talk about two ways that I think are important and not always considered, but that clearly star outperforms ranked choice voting, at least in my view. The first one is election administration. And by that, I mean the counting of votes, the presenting of the results of an election to the voters, and auditing when that becomes necessary. Now, we've seen in recent years how much auditing elections has become a key concern for many people, and we don't want to have an election system that becomes so complicated to understand that voters are going to feel even more that it had been rigged in some way. Here, star voting, the formula for counting votes is much simpler than that of ranked choice voting. In ranked choice voting, often there's a winner in the first round of counting, but in setting up voting machines or any kind of hand counting method, you have to take into consideration there might be multiple rounds of counting. And in each of those rounds of counting, you have to be able to go back and identify particular ballots with the eliminated candidate for the next round, and then tell where each of those ballots is supposed to go to the other candidates. You may have to do that over and over, so the formula for counting becomes very complex, and programming the computerized tabulators to do that is going to take quite a bit of effort, and hard to find the bugs in it, I would think, compared to star voting. So with star voting, it's pretty simple. It's a simple code from what I understand anyway, it should be, and computers can be programmed fairly easily to do that. And when you present the results, there's just two rounds of counting to look at. You say in the first round what are the scores the candidates got, and in the second round, the two top scorers, which one did better than the other one when they're compared head to head. Pretty simple to understand, pretty simple to present, pretty simple to count, and when you audit, that kind of simplicity is also important. Whereas in ranked choice voting with multiple rounds of counting, when you present the results, I've hardly ever seen a multiple round ranked choice voting presentation in which it was easy to follow what actually happened. You have to pay some attention, understand the counting procedure pretty well in order to follow it. So it's not of intuitive clarity to the average voter. So in this respect, I think star voting is superior to ranked choice voting. Now the other one, this topic I could go into quite a bit, and maybe I'll do an entire show on it, but it's representative democracy. Why do we have elections in the first place? Now, it's obviously, I hope it's obvious anyway, that it's not because we think people are all wise and real well informed. No, it's because we want people to be able to protect themselves from tyrannical government, and we want people to, because they're subject to the laws that the government passes, they should have some say in who gets to pass those laws. But because, just reflecting people's views is not adequate, unless people have a way to, what the founders called, refine and enlarge their views by discussion with each other and confrontation with other points of view. Otherwise, you're simply represented a divided public where people each have their own partisan views and they're not talking to each other, and it's reflected in the government. The government becomes gridlocked. It becomes a case of, well, either side is trying to get a majority just to ram their views down the throat of the other. Escalation of that kind of conflict, both in the public and in the government, and eventually you have attempts to rig elections in your favor, and then violence is the ultimate result of that. So we need an election system that both encourages people to talk to each other and present rational reasons for their views. I think the founders had that right. Maybe they were wrong on some other things. I think it also requires voters to have more empathy for each other and a willingness to set aside some of their deeply held views for the sake of consensus. And I don't mean watering them down. I simply mean recognizing that other people's views have some validity as well. And now I'm losing my thread here. What I'm trying to say is that star voting is better than ranked choice voting in this sense. Both of them encourage people to look across partisan bounds, but ranked choice voting maintains the sense that your first choice is all important. That is, which candidate or which party you most closely affiliate with is the one you want to give the highest ranking to, and that's what all that counts when it comes to each round of counting. Whereas in star voting, because all the scores you give for all the candidates are part of the result, that means that anytime you see some validity in someone else's view and you give them a score, that's going to make some difference. It counts not only the strength of attachment to particular parties or views or candidates, but the breadth of interest that people have in candidates. That is, a candidate that can appeal to a lot of different people for different reasons has a better chance of succeeding under star voting than in ranked choice voting, where the candidate who gets the most first choice votes has the best chance of surviving the election.